Well, hey there, my name is Luke, and you're listening to the Good Folks Doing Good Work podcast, a podcast where I get to interview folks all throughout the coffee supply circle about the good they're trying to bring into the world, and hopefully remind you to keep bringing good things into this world in your context. So let's get into this week's podcast. Well, today we have the privilege of speaking with Bill Kennedy, who is an experienced chief executive officer with a demonstrated history in working in the machinery industry and equipment fabrication. One of his strengths is in business development and is particularly skilled in negotiating, budgeting, business planning, and operations management. He also has a keen understanding for coffee house operations and coffee education. Hailing from Carson City, Nevada, welcome to the Good Folks podcast, Bill.
Thank you, Luke. Great to be here. And that intro, that would be a great LinkedIn intro, wouldn't it? I should copy that and put it on my LinkedIn profile there.
We need to hear more about what is special about you, because you're a special guy. Bill, you said you like things that are built to last. I'm curious, do you remember the first thing you purchased or that you were given that was built to last?
Yes, actually, kind of funny that you start with that question. It just instantly popped in my mind. I've always been intrigued by vintage things, old things, and that kind of a thing, kind of a antique, kind of a nut. I mean, as a little kid. And I remember going to a thrift store, and here was an old Kodak Brownie Reflex. Okay, it's used, I think it was the size of the film is 127. And even back then, well, that was more than 50 years ago, the film for that was almost obsolete. You almost couldn't buy film for it. I fell in love with that, and I bought it for $1.75. I remember that. And I was 11 or 12. And I got the film for it, and I had a relative getting married, and I took pictures, black and white pictures.
Oh my goodness.
With that. And I was so excited about that and got the film developed. And that was just, when I bought that old Brownie Reflex, it was already old and obsolete.
Sure.
Now, I still have that. And
that's so cool.
It still works. And to me, that's just absolutely cool. It's just cool.
100%.
And it's just something that you just don't see that anymore, do you? Mm-hmm. So anyway, but yeah, to answer your question, I do remember that. I remember clearly. Reliving the entire thing in my mind, just as I recount it, and the mental imagery and all that just pops in there. It's just very fresh, and it's old, but it's old because I'm old, I guess. But it's over 50 years old, and
it's so cool.
Anyway, yeah.
What drew you to that camera specifically? Were you interested in photography, or was there something about that camera that was like, I gotta have this one?
I've always been an antique vintage guy. I've always had a mechanical curiosity. How do things work? And I was the kid that always was taking things apart. I gave myself a couple of shocks every now and again, radios or other appliances, and playing with motors and all that sort of thing. So I had that kind of inborn inside of me, and it just kind of drew me to things that were curiosities. I need to know how that works, and why is that such a good thing? So I've always had that, whether it was a camera or, I have a couple of cool old brass-bladed fans. I love old radios. I mean, a lot of those old things that are over 100 years old and they still work. And I love that. Absolutely. I'm drawn to that naturally. And I love that aspect about them.
That's so cool. And I think I also love old things that last. And, the saying is you can buy nice, or you can buy it thrice or something like that. But I just think about it from the perspective of things are expensive right now. And what if I buy something that I can fix, repair, and keep for a long time? I buy Red Wings, and I've bought 3 or 4 pairs, and I still have every pair that I've ever bought. And it's for that same reason of let's take care of what we have and maybe fix it, instead of just buying and getting rid of it. Hey, really quickly, I have 3 things I want to share with you. Number 1, I run a consulting firm called Pomelo Coffee Consulting, and we only work with coffee roasters, and we help them with 3 things: their people, their processes, and their profit. Now, within Pomelo, I also run a cohort called Junto. There's 2 of them. One's for owners of coffee roasteries. The other one is exclusively for leaders within coffee roasteries, and both of them are structured similarly. They both have a peer-to-peer coaching portion. You can add on some one-on-one time with me. There's some learning opportunities. But man, I gotta tell you, it has been incredible to see what is possible when a group of leaders get in a virtual room together and are sharing challenges, have some learning opportunities, share the things that they're learning, share resources. It's very, very cool. And so if this sounds interesting to you, you can find out more in the show notes, or you can go to pomelocoffeeconsulting.com, and there's a whole tab there for Junto, both of those groups. Now, lastly, I'm releasing a book. It's slated to be released towards the end of the summer, early fall, and it's on the framework that I use when I work with clients. So if you want to be one of the first to receive that book, head over to my website. There's a tab for the book, and you can pre-order a book now. Back to the episode.
It just seems more and more nowadays things are made with the planned obsolescence. I think we've heard that for a long time. They're meant to have a service life for a certain period of time, and then they're meant to be replaced. Usually after 5 years, like big equipment purchases, after 5 years, the lease is over, and that's when things start breaking. And the breakdowns, the downtime, that is a pretty heavy toll on anything that's going to be any kind of a productive operation. And I'm not just counting, the frustration, but yeah, not fulfilling orders, all those kinds of things they're stressful. Unhappy customers that go with it.
And the switching cost of, I got to replace this piece of equipment and I have to install it. And there's so much loss there. That's not just time related. There's actual money loss that is compounding.
Well, yeah, it's called the cost of lost opportunity. And in other words, if you have downtime, then you're going to have to make up where you're down, because that's an order that still needs to be fulfilled. But that's also then you're going to be fulfilling that order in the time lot that was going to be dedicated to the new order. So that it's like you're losing double when you're down. And so the importance of being down. And I'm talking about, things that are related to not related to preventative maintenance, which are the responsibility of the operator. I'm talking about using, let's say, much less expensive components with planned obsolescence throughout the entire mechanism. And then you have to decide where that is and then take into account availability. The last 5 years we went through the supply chain crisis with the pandemic. All right. Now we have the tariff issues, and those are.
There's tariffs?
Well, I think the tariff issues have hit the coffee industry pretty hard, and not just with the green bean, because a lot of our clients are like, I've had to raise my prices 3 times. But it's across the board, and it's so fluid. You don't know exactly. You're doing you have to be really agile to do the dance around those types of fluctuations. It doesn't necessarily influence things, but it does affect. It goes back to how you always have market dynamics that you have to dance around and be real agile with. But then if you have downtime on top of that, and then let's say you can't get the part, or it's coming from, overseas in any direction of the world, it's like, okay, crap, well, that's 3 weeks. I'm going to be down. Who can fulfill these orders for me? And are they going to do it? In our industry, it's like toll roasting or somebody else doing it. Or I think the best solution is there somebody who's got enough downtime on their machine that I can take my coffees over and roast on it on the same type of equipment to get the same kind of output I'm used to, my personal skill set I'm able to do. So there's a lot of dynamics along those lines too. And so at the end of the day, everybody's going to have downtime. It just happens. The question is, what's going to give you the least amount of downtime? And then especially taking into consideration the supply chain issues and getting replacement components that fail. And it's kind of annoying to be down for a $10 part that comes from overseas and you have a 3-week lead on it, or everything's back ordered, those types of things.
Right.
So, but that goes back to, how we design our equipment to try to accommodate or facilitate the least amount of potential downtime as possible.
You've mentioned planned obsolescence 3-4 times, and for the folks that don't understand that or maybe aren't aware of it, I feel like most people understand what that is, and that's something that is built into our phones and our computers and electronics and manufactured machinery as well. But for folks that don't understand, is the industry standard 5 years for a large machine to essentially be obsolete?
It depends on the machine and the quality of the machine from the original factory. So 5 years is just kind of across the board. So some will be more.
It's not
some
a very
will be
long
less.
time.
It's not, but let's say like a dishwasher. The dishwasher is probably really clearly 5 years. Are you going to get 5 years use out of it? The manufacturers typically will change components so that some components that have wear out issues are no longer available. So in other words, you go into a third party and hopefully you can find a third party that'll manufacture a component. But if you can't, you have a machine, you're going to have to call Sears or, well, not Sears, but Home Depot, wherever you're going to get your next dishwasher. Right. Joe Blow's the appliance repair guy. Put in a new dishwasher and that's all great. That's why home warranty places are great. Sometimes they're a good deal, but it's for that reason. And I just believe that more and more manufacturers are, well, they're manufacturer-centric. They think about themselves and their own profit lines and all those sorts of things, and they try to get away with as much as they can with the consumer for their own benefit. And it's unfortunate, but I believe that a lot of folks are just, things are going to wear out, and that's kind of an expectation. I mean, wouldn't it be nice if you knew that you could get a piece of equipment that was just going to last, and the components used are components that are still being manufactured because they're industrial strength. We use we've used for a majority of our components, we've used most of for more than 30 years.
Wow.
On our stuff. So yeah, it's not hard for us to source stuff. We try to make things simple, but it's not easy to be simple. Sometimes it's more manufacturer centric to be complicated, so that typically the expedient solution is to just get something new at that point and then not worry about even repairs or anything like that.
You brought up dishwashers. It's kind of funny. Our dishwasher went out not too long ago, and it was new, and we moved into the house, and this is our 4th year in the house, and the part that went out in it was $175, and the whole to get a brand new one is like $400 for the exact same one. And it's like, well, why would I buy this part? Because it's like it's gonna keep breaking, and then 2 or 3 more parts down the road, I should have just bought a newer one. And it's an unfortunate situation. So it feels like the entire manufacturing industry is pushing in that direction, driving that direction. How do you're essentially pushing against that entire approach. How do you ensure that you can sustain your business if the entire industry is predicated on a 5-year turn, 5 to 10 year, let's say? If you're trying to build things to last, how do you ensure that your business is going to last by building something that you can fix and you don't have to replace it every couple, 5, 10 years?
Well, it's a tough call sometimes, I'll say that. But at the end of the day, you're building a piece of equipment that integrates very nicely with the human contact. It integrates really nicely with human sensory interaction, whether it's olfactory or visual or audio or tactile, any of those. With a piece of equipment that's quiet enough that a blind person can roast coffee, and with just a few minor modifications so that whether auditory, like the temperature is read out auditorially. Pressure gauge, a magnehelic, is got tactile sensors on it so that he can feel what the gas pressure is. Those types of things. And then making a machine that is so quiet that you can really hear what's going on inside the drum during the roast. That's exciting to me. I'll tell you what, one of the most, I'll say, oxymoronic images that I've seen is, and I don't want to be too, I won't say derogatory, but disparaging. It cracks me up a little bit to see someone sitting behind a roaster, looking at a laptop and seeing the blue line and then tracking the red line on top of it.
Yep.
Like this. I call it the world's slowest video game. And to me, that's not roasting. So that person is probably not our client in our client base.
Interesting.
At least not yet. But I'll tell you what, you have the guy that likes the Tesla, and then you have the guy that likes 1978 Porsche 911 SC Targa.
That's me.
With the stick shift and a cool mountain road to drive it on. All right. That's probably a good metaphor between current roasting technology with all the bells and whistles and lights and gizmos and gadgets and blue lines and red lines. And then there's us. We like to drive. So we like to drive on those mountain roads. We do it for the thrill of it. And then for us, though, yeah, we get the effects after we drink that cup of coffee. And we find out that our senses, our human senses, that we've taken the time to train ourselves to do, are better than the world's slowest video game.
Yeah.
Because our senses, I mean, yeah, you might get more accurate temperatures, you might get a quicker responses and all that, but that doesn't always translate to the cup.
Right.
It can. It's good for consistency. It's good for people that have a lower skill set because they don't have the training.
Right.
They haven't developed it, or they haven't had enough time in the industry. But the people that, I like to say, embrace the craft. And when you embrace the craft, you don't sit down at a potter's wheel and magically be able to spin something that's beautiful. You don't sit down with an artist's palette and blend the colors just right and then put them on the canvas, and come up with a Monet.
Right. But
then when you do become that person, you have a Monet, right?
Right.
So as opposed to, well, this right here, this is totally awesome. It's a print of the Nautilus from the 1954 Disney 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Okay, I'm kind of a nerd that way, right? Okay, it's a print, and it's signed by the artist, but it's still a print. But I've seen his original, and I'd rather have the original. And so our audience, our target client is the artist, I guess. So now, does that mean we ignore advances in technology and those sorts of things? No. So we have the capability of doing anything that the zippity zap guys do.
Yeah, totally.
We do. We can do it. And so if somebody wants it, I get it, because there's some business models that just work really well. Right. They work much better if you have that kind of tech to assist you in production coffee roasting. But I think our primary, well, I got to say, to begin with, my goal was to take the person who had been in industry, they work with Big Brother, or they work with big government. They're just tired of the corporate grind or all that. They want to do their own thing. They want to be their own entrepreneur, and they won't let the artist out and learn how to do that. And so I think that's our person, and we want to try to help that person. Now we were talking about manufacturing and costs and parts and those types of things. There's a late 19th century philosopher. He was also an architect. He was a brilliant guy. His name John Ruskin. And I'm not going to quote it. If you look up John Ruskin, he's full of quotes. But one of my favorite quotes that he's done basically says that you can spend less now to get a piece of equipment, but just know you're going to be spending all that time and more money later on down the road. Or you can buy something that's a little bit better built at a higher price, Now, here's where the downtime parts is. You don't have those downtime. You don't have the cost of lost opportunity and the frustrations and all that sort of stuff repairs. I tell you what, if you have the unknown and you can't get something taken care of and you have orders piling up, that's pretty stressful. I like to think that we build our products in such a way that that's not going to be a factor. Not 100% guaranteed, because nothing is, but I will say that when it comes to when we do our technical support, you so often we're saying, when is the last time you cleaned it?
Yeah,
That
yeah.
just, it comes up. And what? Did you read the manual?
I have to clean this thing?
I'm sorry. Yeah, no. This isn't your new Samsung that's very intuitive and you just plug it in and the remote works, okay? This is a commercial piece of equipment, okay?
Yeah.
There's an expectation that you're going to treat it and train yourself to be at a commercial level of competence to deal with this. And so, cleaning it and doing that sort of thing. Coffee roasting is still, you have espresso machine repair places on almost every city, because every coffee house has espresso machines, but not every coffee house has a roaster. So it's a little bit less, you don't have people in every city to, and it's generally more expensive.
Right.
So the tendency is you're better off taking care of this roaster yourself. Or if it's something with the gas train or something like that, usually a commercial appliance technician can take care of that. A coffee roaster is, in essence, an oven. It has, or a furnace like your air conditioner heater unit in your house. Has all the same safeties. A lot of the parts are very similar. Most appliance technicians will go straight to nuclear reactor when you say I have a coffee roaster.
Totally. I don't want to touch that.
I don't know how to do. I don't know how to do those. Well,
Yep.
I said, can you do a pizza oven? Can you do a clothes dryer? That's probably one of the easiest. A clothes dryer. You have airflow sensors. You have over temp limits. You have all. So you got a drum that rotates.
Spins. Yep. Yeah.
It spins. You have gas or electric, and you have airflow sensors. It's the same thing. So power, venting, heat. That's a coffee. Any roaster in the world.
I have to imagine that your background in education informs some of your approach. And it sounds like you're very educational in how you're teaching and coaching owners to take care of their equipment. Where have you seen this background in education be a superpower in your work?
Well, I was going to say, I'm used to dealing with fifth graders. I'm making a joke of that. Are you smarter than a fifth grader thing?
Yeah.
A lot of people, especially as they're newer entrepreneurs coming in, they don't know what they don't know. And I typically do know what they don't know. I mean, sometimes you have to ask some very basic questions first. Please don't get impatient with me. I'm doing my initial assessment to see what grade you're in, basically.
Yeah.
I have to see what your knowledge base, what your skill set is and what your knowledge base is first. Right. And then from there, that's where I think the education comes in, because you have to do a read, and typically you need to do the read pretty quick on somebody's skill set. Or have the relationship where, we've been talking for a while, so I know exactly where you're at. That's very helpful, because you're not being redundant, those sorts of things. You're helping people. You're actually educating while you're having a conversation, whether it's in the sales process or it's in the technician process, if you're talking to a customer support issue. And it does two things. One, it's rewarding to know that somebody's learning what you're teaching. And that's always a reward. And it's the same type of reward when I was in education or when I was a school administrator. From a macro, my team here at the company, I like to know that they're good teachers as well when they're dealing with clients, but also when they're dealing internally as well. When we have new people that we bring onto our team, that are catching up with how we do things, looking at SOPs, standard operating procedures, those types of things to help the flow and consistency to happen. All of that ties into making sure that people learn, right? And then also people learn different ways too. And that's the other thing too. Yeah, the old, are you tactile? Are you auditory? Are you visual? Most people are a combination of the three. And kind of figuring out, all right, most people are more visual, especially nowadays with all the scrolling they do on Instagram. And so they're used to the visual input. And so we try to do that a lot with, we don't provide certifications and technical training.
Mm-hmm.
But we do have to get a sense of like, yeah, we're not going to provide a technical education for you.
Sure.
If you already
Sure.
have a skill set. At some point too, also for safety reasons, you're better off, not blowing yourself up with a gas appliance. You're better
Agreed.
off, finding a commercial appliance technician to help you with things as well. Training only goes so far. It's good to know when to call an expert.
Mm-hmm. When should someone give you a call? They bought their roaster from you. Been roasting coffee. It's delicious. We can grease the bearings, and we can replace the chains or what have you on the drive system. When is it time to give somebody who knows a little bit more a call?
I think that's self-defining. So I think people need to be comfortable to call in whenever they feel it. It's like the time to call. The time to call is when you think you need. I don't know what to do next. But don't feel like you have to jump through. We don't have this list of hoops to jump through at the back of the manual.
Sure.
Necessarily. So you can't call us until you do this. Just call us. A lot of the solutions are fairly simple.
Yeah.
And again, most of the conversations that we have are related to cleaning or, general maintenance, those types of things. And you talk to any coffee technician that's what they do. They travel around and work on roasteries.
Mm-hmm.
And that you'll find that most of the problems are related to, let's say, a poor internal preventative maintenance schedule.
Right.
With their equipment. I said clean roaster is a happy roaster. So keep it clean, keep it lubricated, and it'll keep singing for you. And that's what you want.
The reason I asked that question was because I literally 3 hours ago got a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. And it was this guy that I had met at SCA this year. And he was like, hey, you probably don't remember me, but I just bought a roaster and it's not turning on. And so we were walking through the whole thing. I was on a video call with them trying to figure out what was going on. And we ended up finding that the drive chain was just hanging off. So I was like, well, that's probably where we should start. Let's make sure that's connected.
Yeah. Well, there, like I said, a lot of things are simple too. And we kind of learned, because of the experiences that we run into, there are situations where we think, okay, why is this not working? And we just ran into a situation where, the roaster we sent out it's a 220 single phase system. Well, the client had hired a good old boy to do the wiring,
Mm-hmm.
and we had 483 phase in the same outlet.
Got it.
And so there was smoke and things weren't working right. It's easy to point to the manufacturer first too.
Right.
And I think we can be patient with that to a certain amount. But when you're doing your build up, make sure you use good people.
Don't cut corners.
Licensed contractors to do your stuff. You can only do it yourself. I mean, I understand bootstrapping. I mean, I was totally bootstrapping when I got into this company. So I understand that. But I also understand it's worth it. It's worth it to pay the tax guy who knows what he's doing.
Always.
And, always, yes. I've heard horror stories. It's worth it to pay the right guy for the electrical. Mm-hmm. It's always worth it to pay the right guy for the plumbing. Mm-hmm. And for the gas. I mean, that's part of the cost of doing business, 100%. Bootstrapping or not, you need to make sure that it's something you can step into.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to be able to handle the cost.
Yep. We're kind of poking around at folks that are starting a roasting company. And for somebody who's new to the industry, what questions should they be asking of a roaster manufacturer to help them determine what machine to purchase?
I think a good roaster manufacturer it's almost like being a business coach too. And so it's nice to be able to ask someone and they can tell you, right, what are your projected volumes?
Mm-hmm.
And then someone might, a lot of times we'll get inquiry like, because everyone is price conscious. So you have to be concerned with that. But someone may put in, I need to know the difference between these, the really our smallest unit it's a 1 pound roaster, and its main purpose is to be a profile roaster. Our next kind of our entry level production roaster would be our 6 pounder roaster, and that's like I said, the first production level. But someone might think, I'm going to start with the 1 pounder, and then I give them the question. I said, what happens when you get your first order for 25 pounds and you're doing between 3 and 4 pounds an hour? I said that is a very, very long Saturday, because it's certainly not going to be enough for you to give up your day job.
Right.
All right, is that where you want to go? So do the same thing in 2 to 4 hours on your 6 pound roaster. So the question is, okay, how many batches an hour? And kind of figure out what your time is. Time is probably your most valuable commodity. Mm-hmm. And you need to have time to go out and drum up business. I mean, at the end of the day, this is a business. Just like any other business venture in any industry, you need to be careful not to wear all the hats, where, you only have so many hours in a week. And if you're wearing 10 hats and all of them require 20 hours, you're going to have a problem.
Yeah.
So I would probably look at the time component first and see what you got, because a lot of our clients start, this especially happened, I started in 2008, and that was kind of like the first Great Recession back then. And so a lot of people were starting cottage industry types of things, their little 6 pounder in their garage or their den, and they're doing that type of thing. So they haven't given up their day job, and they didn't necessarily want to yet, because they wanted the security of being able to keep paying the bills and so on. But time is probably the most important commodity we have, and we need to make sure that we have time for, our family, and those things that are precious to us.
Yeah.
You don't want to be the cat in the cradle guy, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's really important. A long answer to say, probably go to time first. Financial resources are important, but I think your time resource should be your first consideration. And how much money do you need to have to afford the time resource that you've allotted yourself?
Right.
Start there.
I've actually changed my perspective on this, because I used to coach people to not get over their skis with the size roaster they're purchasing. And the reason why I used to take that approach was I was seeing so many roasteries that were they had bought way too big of a roaster, and they put the whole thing on credit, which is understandable, but they had no real timeline or projection for when they were going to maximize that roaster and be able to recoup their financial commitments to it. But now I've actually shifted, and I agree with what you're saying is maybe get the biggest roaster that you can afford to give yourself back more time, so that you're not roasting all day on Saturday for a very, very small order. And then you can go pound the pavement and knock on doors and try to sell your coffee or be at a market or what have you. So I think it's really, really helpful feedback.
Well, I'd like to add to that. A lot of people, okay, I'm going to start small. I'm putting my toe in the water to see what the temperature is. Mm-hmm. But just know that at some point, if you're going to grow your business, you're going to have to get the next size roaster up.
Right.
Taking that step, it's almost like going into business again, because it's a huge financial and logistical challenge to do that. And then if you do it again, and if you're thinking in your mind that I'm going to do that 3 or 4 times and keep going up, I would recommend against it. And like you said, I'd go with as big a roaster as you can afford that makes sense.
Right.
that limits the amount of times you have to transition to the next size up.
Mm-hmm.
Just because of the cost of, well, you might trade in. I mean, we take trade-ins on our roasters, and I don't think anybody else does. It's like I said, why would you take in on trade something that you plan to make obsolete? But we do, because the bones of ours are strong. We can talk about construction methods later. Most people have to sell their roaster on the secondary market, and go
Right.
through, a secondary broker, which typically all they do is earn a commission, and they have a popular website, and they make good money doing that. Yes, that's fine. It's a good working business model for a few folks, but that's a hassle.
And you're never gonna get your money back out of it. And if you bought it on credit, and then you're probably chasing that too. So it's like, maybe you could just buy something that would last a bit longer. That'll get you a little bit further down the road.
Here's where the 5 years comes from. That's how long most leases are. They're
Right.
5 years.
Right.
And it'll vary how much life you're going to get out of your piece of equipment after that 5 years. But preferably, hopefully, you've outgrown it at least, and you can either buy a second unit or the next larger unit. I will say that sometimes buying a second unit is a good idea rather than going to the next unit. It's less capital intensive, and you actually gain some redundancy
100%.
for downtime. And it's always easier to run a double shift for a couple of days than it is to be 100% down for a couple of days, right? At least you can maintain the production levels that you need to maintain.
You've talked quite a bit about how the character of a company matters, and your approach to this within your business of the golden rule approach. What does it mean for you to cultivate a company that has a character that is lived out and not just a banner above the bathroom door?
It's my goal to maintain as high quality a product as we can. I have a GE fan. It's got the brass blades and stuff in my office. It was built in 1898. I can plug it in and turn it on, and it works. And I got another one, because I like brass bladed fans because I think they look cool, made by a company called Emerson. Had mountain peaks on their logo. They have a little medallion in the center of that old fan. And it says, built to last. It was built in 1919, and it will blow the papers off my desk. And I got a lot of them. Yeah, so how did they do that? I mean, yes, it's good engineering, but you need more than good engineers. You need good people with a high degree of character that really care about what they're doing, every step of the manufacturing process. And so I like to, we had our company lunch yesterday. We do that every month, and we're talking about things along those lines. And keeping in mind the end user is incredibly important. It's really easy to think, well, this is my job and this is what I do, and this is what makes me uncomfortable, or this is what makes me happy. And everything, it's human nature to be self-centered that way. It takes a certain amount of discipline and intentionality to think outside of yourself in everything that you do. How is what I'm doing right now going to affect the end user? And so we spend a lot of time dealing with those types of things in our hiring process when we're looking for people. And it's not perfect because people aren't perfect, right? Everybody wants perfect people, but what we do is we look for people that have that kind of intentionality to be outward thinking, outside of their own selves, to take the golden rule, for example, kind of seriously. I'm going to be thinking about our clients, our end user, the way I would think about how I would want this thing for myself. So for us, we manufacture these coffee roasters. We want everything to be so that our end users can be ecstatically happy. That's our goal. And so,
Ecstatically happy. That's great.
we aim for, ecstatically happy. And so we love hearing that. And our goal is to make that the norm. And if we miss that mark, then we try to make that norm as much. Yeah, we try to fix it, right? We're shooting for the 5-star review every time. And most of the time we get it, you know. And our goal is to do better. We can always do better, right? And so that's it. You can't do better if you're complacent. You cannot do better if you're self-centered, or you come into work with a dark cloud, like the Peanuts characters, or the dark cloud with the rain and lightning and storm. Yeah, I said I have a no dark cloud policy here.
That's a good
check
policy.
Check the dark clouds at the door. These dark clouds are cancerous.
Mm-hmm.
But maintaining as clean and as positive of a company environment and culture as possible. It's my goal, because I know that will reflect on the output of what everybody's doing.
In manufacturing a piece of equipment, how do you keep that in the forefront? Is there a phrase that you use? Is there a practice you take? Is there a rhythm of learning and asking questions of your users? How do you keep your customers top of mind?
Well, I think it's maintaining mastery of the basics. By mastery of the basics, it's like the basics. You have to be on top of those. They have to be second nature to you. So in the culture of the company, if we are maintaining a mastery of the basics, where culture is important, interactions are important. As I'll show this, this is what we do. We use this. There we go. The ideal team player, Patrick Lencioni, he's pretty popular, organizational leader, and talks about that. And there's 3 main topics on that, and it's being humble, being hungry, and being smart. And I'm going to spend a lot of time about culture and what it's like inside of company culture, because that is always going to reflect positively for the end user. So being humble is exercising humility. You're not easily threatened. You check the dark cloud at the door. If you need help, you ask for it. If you're given instruction, you don't argue, or you learn ways. This ties into being smart. Being smart, it doesn't necessarily reflect on intellectual capabilities. Being smart is, do you have the wisdom to know when to speak and when not to? Saying the right word at the right time, or saying something that could be challenging, but saying it in a way that's not threatening, or where it becomes a power play where you're trying to intimidate, but you're humbly challenging, saying or suggesting. Those types of things, that's where real growth can happen. What do you think if that kind of thing? So being humble, being smart, and then being hungry. Being hungry is like, okay, we all have a goal here, and it's to get a roaster out the door to our client in a good timeline for the client that works for the client. And we're all going to put in and do what it takes to see that happens. Having those, it's like 3 legs of a stool that you sit on. And if any one of those is missing, you're tipping over. Okay.
Right.
You're going to become someone who's not going to be productive for the team and is going to be detrimental. If you have one person that's got one leg missing in an organization, it's almost like a cancer. And it's really important to see either change, address behaviors and see change happen, or say, you know what, now's a good time to part ways, because clearly we're not the company that's going to work for you.
Right.
And I think it's important to be able to say that. And so our loyalty is to character and even over competence. Because you can have someone who knows everything and can be a total arrogant fill in the blank with whatever expletive came to you. Because that arrogance is the opposite of humility. We can find levels of competence that serve the company well, that have the other 2 attributes of being hungry and being humble. I think those kind of people are the people that we're looking for when we grow. So if someone moves out of the area or whatever, that's usually the reason why we lose somebody. Because we use those, we spend a lot of time in our hiring when we do hire to work on that humble, hungry, and smart thing. For the most part, we do pretty good. And well enough that if someone has a weakness, they're at least humble enough to be coached to the
Sure.
next level, to a higher level, and that works well. And then in our field, and it's like the competence, even if you have a lower level of competence, it comes with practice.
Right.
We can develop that internally and help people along those lines.
I love that picture of the stool and the absolute non-negotiable of being humble, hungry, and smart. And as you described, if you're missing one of those legs, what ends up happening is the rest of your team has to come around them to keep them up, and then they're not pulling their own weight. And so I love that approach in that picture because it makes it practical for folks.
I mean, it's a good point that you make because if people are having to carry another person's weight, it's enough. I mean, life is challenging enough where, we have a lot of challenges where we are carrying the weight of like our family, our personal relationships out of work. It'd be nice not to have to carry the weight of your colleagues as well. And it could be a good team. But also, those types of people are the ones who, if they desire it, they're also the best people to grow into leadership as well.
Sure.
And if you have those three areas balanced well, you're going to be a good leader in your family, with your colleagues outside of work. I don't want anybody in our organization, when they walk out the door, everybody breathes a sigh of relief.
Yeah.
Okay? I don't think that's healthy at all. So, that's what we make the biggest effort probably in our hiring process to make sure that that isn't the person that's coming in.
It's super smart. Super smart. And I've definitely worked in companies where there was one person that everybody was just supporting, and then when they leave there's a sense of relief, and oftentimes it's somebody that's on the chopping block, but the person in leadership, and I've been guilty of this too, of keeping people around too long and being like, well, I can probably coach them a little bit more if I just give them a little bit more. But I think it's really healthy to have the structure of there's three legs on this stool. If one of these are missing, you got to go out the door. It's kind of brutal, but it's also, you got to protect the people that have those three legs that are pushing your vision forward.
Well, there's two ways to run a company. One is, the accountant or the venture capitalist way, where we're looking at optimal costs. So you're looking at, I want to keep our labor costs low. I want to keep our cost of goods low. Everybody wants that, but there reaches a point where you're doing it at the expense of the client. But you don't care about the client.
Right.
You care about shareholders or profit sharing or all that sort of thing. I mean, we're a closely held company. It's owned by my wife and I. So we're able to 100% put our value set into how we do things. We decide what a fair margin is, and then we just stay right at that. But that fair margin is going to ensure, though, using the golden rule, that our client is treated the same way that we're going to be treated ourselves. Yeah. I know the internal processes. I know all the places to maybe cut corners, but I wouldn't do that if it was my piece of equipment. Right. I could build coffee roasters, like Whirlpool builds dishwashers, thin folded sheet metal over a square frame, and throw a bunch of electronics on it and light it up like a Christmas tree. It looks flashy. It doesn't cost nearly like what, but picture in your mind an old steam locomotive. That's how we build our roasters, like that. They're incredibly robust, and they will last a long time. They'll last like any of the pieces of equipment that I admire in my office. And, they will in 100 years, after I'm long gone, they're still going to look really, really cool, and they're going to draw the admiration of the people that see it, and they're going to work. And that's just cool to me.
Very
It's
cool.
just absolutely Yeah, they will not have been recycled 4 times.
You also host a podcast. It's called Coffee Roasting Legends, which I had the privilege of being on. And one of the things I noticed about your approach is you acknowledge the potential in your guests and you champion them. Where does this optimism, this kindness, this desire of championing these business owners come from?
I see the good in everybody, I guess, and I see people that, they're doing something right. And I also know that there are a lot of people that want to be that person too. And if I can talk to someone and say, tell me your story, and find the challenges that they went through. You see the old Hollywood movies. It's like a pathway. It's a storyline, basically. You introduce the characters, and you develop the storyline. There are challenges along the way, and how they overcome the challenges. It'll come to like a climax kind of a thing, and then a resolution, and then the happily ever after. Well, our people aren't necessarily at the happily ever after part.
Right. Right.
But they're past the hard part. Usually the hardest part is just starting. I mean, that's where you need the inertia. From talk about physics, an object that's not in motion, it takes a lot more force to get the inertia going. And so that's the hard part. And that's where the biggest challenges are. And I feel like the more times I share that with people and people see that and see how others of all, men, women, all racial backgrounds, multicultural, everything. I mean, the human experience is the human experience, and it's different for everybody. And there are different challenges. Showing it where you can have the positive mental attitude. Said, I'm going to do this. And tough times, this too shall pass. And you don't give up.
Yeah.
I got to tell you. So I think I'm a smart person, but my grades didn't reflect it in college. I'm not going to give any other excuses other than, I didn't party or anything. I just, my grades weren't that great.
Sure.
But I was always the angler looking for, I think I talked to professors more about different ways for me to get the credit I needed.
Sure. I've been there. I wasn't a great student either.
Yeah. Well, so the years ago, it's probably been maybe 20 years ago or so, I was reading an article in the Wall Street Journal. And they said the typical CEO had like a 2.5 GPA.
Yeah.
And you know what set them apart from like the 4.0s?
I don't know.
Grit. That's what they said.
Interesting.
Grit. Stick to perseverance, really.
Yeah.
And so that's what I'm looking for. Okay.
Yeah.
I think I got a little bit of that. And if we could share that, if we can help motivate people to find, I think everybody's got perseverance in them.
Right.
Sometimes you just got to pull it out, right?
100%.
And just pull it out and then use it. And the thing about perseverance is to maintain perseverance, you have to have perseverance, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But this is where the word, I hate buzzwords, but this is where I really like the word intentionality.
Sure.
Okay. You have to be intentionally perseverant and choose to I'm going to do this. I am not going to give up. All right. Now, obviously, wisdom has to sneak in someplace. There are places where maybe wisdom says, don't give up, but don't go in that direction. Go in this slightly different direction.
Right.
And there's always room for that. But again, find the perseverance, help people to find the perseverance, motivate them to say, this is something that I could do. And by the time they're watching my podcast, Coffee Roasting Legends, coffee's already on their mind, right? So yeah, watch these other people and see what they did. And I think motivation and probably some good ideas will come out of it.
Yeah, I love that. we have a closing tradition, and it is to share a few books that have been formative on your journey. Could be business, could also be personal. But I'm curious, I know you mentioned the book a little bit earlier by Patrick Lencioni. Is there any other books that have been particularly formative in your journey and in your life?
Probably what keeps my soul grounded, keeps my soul refreshed, is the Holy Scriptures. I practice a Christian faith. I'm in the Bible, and the wisdom that comes out of it. Here's where you see everything. You see every good and to the greatest good, and you see every evil to the greatest evil. But you see, it's the best way for me to stay grounded and to stay focused, to have the perseverance, to maintain the perseverance during our family worship time that we have with our family, studying King David, and he just lost his kingdom to his son Absalom, but he got it back. He's pretty incredibly dark times. That's probably my greatest thing. Otherwise, I'm not that much of a reader, except that I do love biographies.
Oh, interesting.
So I love reading it. Yeah, well, biographies, you hear it's the same kind of a thing. Biographies, they're telling the story of their life, or an author is telling the story of somebody else's life. And it's the same thing. Challenges, overcoming the challenges, taking that next step over and over and over. I love that. I find a lot of motivation in those sorts of things.
Yeah.
So...
Yeah, very cool. What was the last biography you read?
It would have been on Spurgeon, Charles Spurgeon.
My favorite quote from Charles Spurgeon was, this is showing my Bible background, was when somebody who was very puritanical, we'll say it, came up to him and said, "How smoking is a sin," because he loved cigars. And he said, I'll stop when there's a problem. And they said, well, how are you going to know? And he said, when I have 2 cigars at the same time. That's my favorite quote from Charles Spurgeon.
He was such a brilliant wordsmith, and he too has a lot of amazing quotes, some incredible insights into humanity. And, we're well into postmodernism in a lot of ways. He was dealing with modernism and different things, different ways of looking at things. Mm-hmm. He didn't shy away from controversial issues at all. He made enemies.
Yeah.
But but I have to respect him for his resoluteness. Kind of like Chesterton, right?
Sure.
He was another great, a great wordsmith as well.
It's been a long time since I've talked about them, so it's coming back into my history. Well, Bill, thank you so much for spending some time with us and sharing about your appreciation for things that last and your approach towards manufacturing, which is genuinely running in the opposite direction of manufacturing approaches of today. And I think it's a very smart and good approach towards making things to last and to repair and to keep them around. And so thank you for sharing that with us, and thank you for your approach towards leadership and sharing that with us. How should a roaster get in touch if they want to maybe buy a coffee roaster from you?
Our website is San Fran Roaster. We manufacture the San Franciscan roaster. Okay, that's our brand. A lot of people have a hard time with their S's and their C's and placement in the word San Franciscan.
A lot of people call it San Francisco roasters, right?
They do. Stop it.
Yeah.
San Fran Roaster. San Fran, it just kind of rolls off the tongue more easily. If you do spell San Franciscan Roaster and you put that in a domain, it'll redirect to our San Fran Roaster. Look at our website, check that out. Go to our landing page, fill it out, and if you want to talk to me, just call. Just say I want to talk to Bill. I'm not too shy of the phone. I mean, sometimes I'm busy, but I won't say we're necessarily mom and pop, but we are still a smaller manufacturer where I'm not too busy to talk to people. Mm-hmm. I'm happy to chat. So
yeah, I appreciate that.
That's the
Well,
best way. SanFranRoaster.com.
all right. Go check them out. And Bill, thanks again for being here. Always a pleasure to chat with you and to catch up. Be well.
Well, hey, thanks for your invitation, Luke, and it was an enjoyable conversation.
100%. Hey, it's Luke, and I'm back one last time with 2 questions. Number 1, did you learn anything from that podcast? Or did you stumble upon a new question or a new thing that maybe you're not sure what the answer is? If either of those 2 are true for you, reach out to me on LinkedIn, or you can reach out to me at PomeloCoffeeConsulting.com. And there's a contact tab. Reach out to me. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear what questions you have, or maybe what question was answered in this podcast. As always, be well.